I've done some amount of work in the insurance industry, and one of my observations is that data has a special role in what we would normally think of as product development, right? So when you're developing an insurance product, in a sense, a lot of the product is actually made out of data. That's sort of one observation. The other observation is that regulatory, lots of different kinds of data, generally fairly siloed. For example, you mentioned, property and casualty. Lines of business are generally fairly segregated. There's a lot of state and federal kind of overlapping regulatory framework. So in working with the business, how much of what you do is on what I would call, probably a bit simplistically, the product development side versus enabling all of that from kind of all that back end complexity that I just described?
And I would say that for the most part, and I'll even take a step back, within the insurance industry, you hit the nail right on the head. Data has been our fundamental, it has been fundamentally a part of insurance since the time insurance began within the world. We cannot do anything. If you think about the risks that we try to assess, the products we tried to build, all of that is based on the data that we've aggregated. So data in the insurance industry is nothing new. It's been around. We use it. So when we hear all these concepts, big data, data and analytics, the insurance industry, although not exciting, not flashy, has really been doing these types of things for years. And it's somewhat refreshing to see people now starting to see, gosh, maybe the insurance industry had it right. Maybe data is an asset. Maybe it is something that we can use in a much broader level. And my focus, while the product areas are important to an insurance company, a lot of and they rely on the data that my team is accountable for providing oversight of. I would say most of our work is really branching out even beyond the product area and the product spaces and working with some of those silos and trying to get an understanding of what data is out there in those silos. How do we have control over that data? And then how do we bring it all back together so that if the product team does want to use some of that information, they have the access, the knowledge, and the awareness of what's out there so that they can take it to their analytic models and look to improve the products. But for me, product is not where I spend a ton of time per se. I'm more focused on, let me get my arms around all of this data, let me catalog, let me assess, let me evaluate, let me define how can I create this global asset that can then be used by anybody across the enterprise to perform whatever data or an analytic scenario they want to walk through.
Well, I think that's really insightful, Mark. Thank you for that. And I think so. If I sort of replay that, it's almost like what I call the world of data operations, right? So it sounds like a lot of your work is sort of focused on creating that high availability, well curated with proper controls, regulatory framework, that set of assets that then the product teams, since the products are basically largely made out of data anyway, they can kind of go and in a more orderly and a more innovative fashion kind of figure out how you can price risk, which essentially is what insurance boils down to.
Correct. I think that's a great synopsis.
And interestingly, you made another point that I just can't resist amplifying for any math geeks in the audience. If you're my age and at one point you took linear algebra, right? Actuarial science is essentially applied linear algebra. Big data and tensor analysis, the way that it's deployed in Google and Facebook and all these technology companies, is distributed processing on large sets of data, primarily using linear algebra or tensor-based applications. So it's like the technology caught up with actuarial science the way that it's been done for the last 100 years. So just a historical footnote for anyone who doesn't, it's a fascinating area of technology.
And I think once again, we could, this would take us down another path, maybe for another conversation, but data, people oftentimes have looked at data. Oh, I'm not a data person. In today's environment, I don't think that's an acceptable answer anymore. And I think data, understanding data, being able to use data, that's a discipline that we need to instill across the board, across an enterprise, across our education system. because it is becoming more and more prominent. It is becoming more important. And being able to understand how to use data in order to make decisions is going to be a foundational skill. In my opinion, it already is a foundational skill for anybody coming into the business world. And that's what's exciting is a lot of folks have oftentimes said, oh, I'm not a data person, and they kind of wipe their hands. That's, in my opinion, that's not going to fly anymore. And it goes against where the world is taking us with the volume of data that's being created, the amount of data that can be used for improved decision making. It's really exciting from my perspective to finally see data getting the attention as a discipline across the business spectrum, as opposed to kind of that hands off, oh, you're an expert in that data space.
Yeah, that data stuff. Yeah, I completely agree.